Obama and Biden got together in public was a week after my book came out. So that was the first time post-presidency in a year and a half that they'd gotten together. I'm not saying, I have that kind of power, but what if I do? I don't know. I have to think hard about it. I have to use it wisely.
Have to be very careful.
Well, if that's true, I have some suggestions of some books you could write for me.
Okay. Are these just personal?
No, a lot of political. Can you talk a little bit about how you got your first book published? I know that this is your first mystery book. You have other books that you've written.
Yeah. It's like my 10th book overall. I had always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. I never wanted to do anything else, but it took a long time to get there to be a published writer. I went to the University of Iowa where I learned stuff from Writers Workshop students and professors and stuff. And it took me until I was almost 30 before I published. I think I was 30 before I published my first book, which ended up being a nonfiction book called Great Philosophers Who Failed at Love. Now, I knew nothing about philosophy. I knew nothing about philosophy. It was based on a series of greeting cards that I wrote, which were just like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and these different philosophers saying really negative, awful things about romance. And because they were often frustrated in their personal life, it was just a sort of a gift book where it was like, 40 different philosophers contrasting their private love lives or lack thereof with what they said about romance and whatnot. It was meant to be humorous. It got shelved in the philosophy section, and I knew nothing about philosophy, so I ended up doing events with people who had written serious philosophy books and stuff. So it was very strange. And I was just like, oh, I knew guys like you in college. Oh, my God. They could talk. They'd talk around you for hours, especially when they were drunk. And so it wasn't the book I thought I would write at first. I always wanted to be a novelist. I read detective novels. My favorite type of novels were mystery novels and horror novels. And so I always liked anything that was sort of genre. I had no idea I was going to write a nonfiction book, but that's just kind of how it worked out, was that I did a series of greeting cards, published them online, and people sort of gravitated towards them, and they got me some publicity. From that publicity, I was able to attract the attention of an agent who said, hey, have you thought about turning these into a book? And it was a week later, I had a book deal. It was really strange. It was not what I expected. I expected to go a very different way. And from there, I wrote another nonfiction book about authors who drank and did drugs and stuff. It's called Literary Rogues, and it was just about how scandalous their lives were. And then I did a parody called 50 Shames of Earl Grey. And from there, I started to do some tie-ins to movies, How to Survive a Sharknado, which is really great advice. I don't know if I'd say I got sidetracked, but I was writing books, but I wasn't necessarily writing the type of books that I read or that I thought I would write. And so it wasn't really until this book that I was like, oh, this is a mystery. This is what I read. And it's got a quirky angle with the president. And so I was like, I finally sort of found it. And so it's the first book that I've written a sequel to. So there might be another one down the road. I hope to keep writing in that vein because it's resonated with people. And I'm not saying my other stuff didn't, but this also resonates with me. So,
well, that's one of the most unique ways I've heard of becoming an author, by way of the greeting card industry. So.
Yeah. You wouldn't think I did the whole sending out short stories and getting rejections and sending out novels and getting rejections for a good 10 years in my 20s. And at that point, I had basically given up on writing. I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just write greeting cards because I was also an artist. And I was like, well, I can combine two things. And yeah, I'd given up. I was like, oh, no one's going to like these. And lo and behold, that led to the first book deal. Very odd.
It just goes to show you never know.
Yeah. So when you ask a writer and you're like, oh, you try to duplicate someone's path, every writer's path is so different that even if you could crack and say, oh, I'm going to do what you did, well, that avenue's closed down now. So you have to find your own way.
Timing is everything, they say.
Yeah.
Especially in this world. Your wife is an author also?
Yeah, Tiffany writes.
What types of book does she write?
She writes erotica, romance, women's fiction for Harlequin Books, one of their imprints called Mira. And so she writes stuff that's, very different than mine, but it's great stuff. In fact, I had read one of her books before we started dating, and I was like, wow, this is really great. You don't know. You don't want to start dating another writer and then read one of their books and go, oh, Oh, that's not good.
Especially
So-
if you didn't like it. That would be good.
Yeah, I mean, and it didn't hurt that it was erotica. She writes some great stuff, though.
Well, I read your acknowledgement in the back, and you gave her credit for some of the jokes in the book, but she wanted the cat to get credit.
Yeah, she had read the book and suggested one of the jokes in the book that they do a game called POTUS, SCOTUS, or FLOTUS.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
And when she suggested this, I said, if she suggests it, it sounds funny. And then I go, if I'm the one that puts it in the book, it sounds like a sexist thing. And I got around that by having, Obama say, oh, this is a really sexist, horrible game, Joe, to where they're sort of grading women. And I was like, this is so horrible. And then it ended up being like my editor, the first note I got back on the book was like, oh my God, this joke is great.
Well, there were quite a few moments in this book where I laughed out loud reading this book. It was great. It's great to read a mystery that it was a good mystery, but it still was entertaining. Great job.
Yeah, it's tough. You want the funny stuff to be real moments between the characters, but I think the trick is to have it hanging on a serious mystery to keep you reading. Because if a book is just funny nonstop from beginning to end with no plot, you can put it down at any time, basically. There's what keeps you reading. It was definitely a balance I tried to strike there.
You did.
Thank you.
Now, we know about Hope Rides Again. Do you have any other books or events you'd like our listeners to know about?
Not at all. Oh my goodness, no. I've always really just worked like one book in advance because I know a lot of writers, they're working like 2 years in advance on a book or something, and then they have a lot of time. But almost every book I've done has been like, oh, you've got like 3 months or you've got 6 months to do this. And we got to get it done really fast. So I've always worked under a really tight deadline. And then it's like, oh, now you don't have anything to do for the next 6 months. But I'll probably be going on another book tour this summer. I would say just keep a lookout for me riding into town. Probably not on an Amtrak, probably on a radio. But yeah, the tour that I did last summer was 6 weeks long. It was by far the longest I've ever been away from home. Just on a sort of tour like that, I wasn't really prepared for it. I was like, oh my gosh. And probably by the end of it, I wasn't doing the laundry and I was probably a mess. So I say, come out this summer. I'll have a change of clothes with me. It's going to be totally different. But they've been really fun events, though. So I hope to do some more where are you located?
Maryland.
Maryland. I did one in Fredericksburg.
Oh, okay.
I think Curious Iguana, I think it was something. There were a couple out there that I got kind of confused about because I was like, where am I? Because all the states are just like right
next to each other. Yeah.
I'm in Maryland. Nope. I'm in DC.
Okay.
Nope.
Do you ever do any of the mystery conferences?
I haven't done any of them yet because for so many years I went to romance conferences with my wife. I get just sort of conference fatigue. I loved doing them, but it was just like if you go to a conference, you're there for a couple of days or a week, and then it just is a whole chunk out of your schedule, and it's so much fun. Then you go home and you're like, oh, I want to go back out. And no, you got to work now.
One here in Maryland in May called Malice Domestic.
Oh, okay.
It's May 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Yes.
And so you might want to check that out. We'll be there.
Oh, okay. Malice Domestic.
It's every year in Bethesda, Maryland.
Right outside Washington.
I am going to be at one in DC called a Polycon in March, but it's mostly going to be a romance convention. I get myself seated there too.
Oh, nice. I notice a lot of romance readers also enjoy the mystery genre, so they hold hands very well.
If you like a certain type of genre writing, you like entertaining writing, you like mysteries, romances, horror. I say anything but literary fiction, really, which is ironic since that's sort of what I went to school to learn to write. But sometimes you learn what you don't like.
Well, I guess that's what school is for.
Right.
So you said Hope Rides Again comes out in July, I think you said?
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
I tell you what, Andrew, that when it comes out, we'd love to have you back on.
All right. Sounds great. Definitely drop you a line because the events are really fun. They're not like boring readings. They're really fun. Sometimes the crowds are a little rowdy. Political crowds, they get a little rowdy.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you'll update all this on your website?
Yeah, it's just andrewshaffer.com, SHAFFER.com.
We'll will update our show notes with that information. So if people want to check you out, they can go on your website.
Excellent.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being a part of our show. We thoroughly enjoyed this book and we'll be waiting with bated breath for the next one.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun and great to see Obama and Biden get together and ride again. I especially like Joe's ride.
Oh, yeah.
The charge.
What did he call it? The Beast was
The Beast, the Obamas, and the Charger was Joe's. But yeah, for the next book, there's going to be a wide variety of vehicles. I said it's going to turn in by the third book. It's going to be like the Fast and the Furious franchise. It's just going to be all about the cars. You're going to forget about the characters. You'll just be like, who was in this? I don't know, but there was some great cars.
I have a 19-year-old son, and he was looking at the book, and he was asking me questions about it. I actually told him, I said, honestly, after a while, I kind of forgot that it was Obama and Biden in the book. It became a buddy detective mystery.
Sure.
But yeah, lots of vehicles in the next one.
Okay, awesome. All right, Andrew, well, you have a wonderful rest of your day and hope to talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks for talking to me, Tracy and Kathy. Have a great day.
Thanks again,
Bye-bye.
Andrew. Bye-bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Andrew is a very interesting character.
He sure is, but he's definitely very humorous, and that came through in the book very well.
Absolutely. Whatever your political views are, just to poke a little fun at these characters, all in good nature, not mean poke fun. It was very enjoyable, and I did really laugh out loud quite a few times when they ended up in the cow field.
I don't think that anyone could take offense at his book. Andrew said he was a little nervous about how Joe Biden and Barack Obama would view his portrayal of them, but I don't think there was any danger of them not liking his portrayal. They both came off very well and funny, of course.
I thought it was great how in the beginning of the book, Biden was jealous of Obama's adventures with movie stars.
Famous people, yes, definitely. That's very cute.
And how fit he was, how anybody who knows anything about Obama can see how fit he is.
Well, he's also a much younger man than Joe Biden.
Absolutely.
I can see an older man being a little bit jealous of a younger acquaintance.
I'm curious what direction he's going to take this in the next book. I liked how at the end of this book they talked about getting their detective license and whether they're going to pursue that. I think the thing that I was most curious when I started reading this book is how they were going to handle the Secret Service, because even though the vice president apparently loses his detail.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
But the president
never loses his detail. So I was curious how they were going to work that into the story. And I thought that Andrew did a good job. I think they handled it very well, how they lost him at some point.
Yeah, they snuck away from him.
And then he got injured. And so there was plenty of Biden-Obama moments without
their Secret Service keeper. Yeah, but it sounded like their keeper was glad to get rid of them at the end of this.
Wouldn't you be? My goodness.
I know. There are a couple of troublemakers.
Seedy hotels. And Delaware, actually, there are some beautiful parts of Delaware, but the parts they describe in this book.
I've been to Delaware quite a few times in my life, but I don't think I've ever come across the seedy area. But then, you drive through Delaware and it's like blink of your eye and you're gone.
What he said about you can be in one state, that is so true with the mid-Atlantic region. We have states all over the place.
Yeah. And like you said, you didn't have to be Democrat or care for a political party one over the other with this book. You just enjoyed the mystery and enjoyed the relationship that Andrew imagines for Barack and Joe.
And what's cool about it is since you do know these characters, you can see where some of the idiosyncrasies came from. You can tell Andrew definitely did his homework. I didn't know some of these things. Like, I knew Barack Obama smoked cigarettes. I thought maybe he eventually quit.
What I would like to hear more of, and it sounds like Andrew is including Michelle and Jill more in the next book, and I would like to see how he portrays them and how he includes them. And
I would read a mystery just with Michelle and Jill. They are two formidable women.
Absolutely, and very accomplished both in their own fields. So I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yep, definitely.
Well, I think that Andrew Shaffer just took Barack Obama and Joe Biden and portrayed them as being a great team, as they seem to have been in the White House, and so he thinks they continue that same vein in mystery solving. So that should be a lot of fun for the next